ESPN started off as a very small sports broadcasting company. As they grew, they were later on bought by Disney, and that helped pivot their growth into what they would become in the future. By the 90s, they became one of the most profitable channels that would be on cable television. They did that by making their packages through cable, and so they did that by making affiliate fees, and that's where a lot of their revenue came from. They charged the most out of, honestly, almost every other cable channel at first, and then they came to dominate that they were the most expensive cable channel. But how that would be broken down was in the packaging, and people would buy ESPN along with whatever channels that they wanted. But in comparison to how largely they dominated the sports media at this time, this is from 2015, ESPN was $5 billion ahead in their viewership and what they charge per subscriber. And that was in 2015, so 10 years ago, money was a lot bigger, but they remained at the top of kind of that food chain of viewership, especially in sports media, but at this rate, it was of all channels. And after 2015, there was this change of possibly that those packages were not the best way for ESPN to stay on top of all of that viewership and revenue and keep it going. They got a little scared. Their projections of all this overhead from having to buy into those channels and get their broadcasting rights was becoming very, very high in comparison to the viewership at that time. And part of that is due to the younger generation was starting to want to have more on-demand and direct-to-consumer content that they could access and things like that. And here is another one of all of the channels that ESPN sports-wise was ahead of. And they still dominated every channel, but if they wanted to continue the growth, they really needed to pivot in a way that they could capitalize on all of the newer ways that people wanted to view their content. And unfortunately, they were locked into that contract that they had to also quickly expand into the digital age. But they also had to, unfortunately, keep all of those other contracts going. I'm sure they've tried to renegotiate those. But so in respect to that, by the year 2015, their cash flow operating in revenue numbers were getting much closer than they would have liked. I would have somewhat described it as them hitting the jackpot with what they had during the cable and satellite era. And if they want to continue to be successful, they really need to find other ways to bring in that revenue. And part of that would be offering, so during the 2015 time, the most popular on-demand network was Netflix, and they really started to prove that if you were able to personalize content to what people want, and you could even do tiered systems. If you want ESPN, Disney Plus, now that those two are together, you can pay this price, and there's even ESPN Plus. And they started to branch out and making all these smaller branches of themselves, and I believe that helped into their new age revenue and less dependent upon the cable era, just where they did really hit the jackpot that way. But if they want to remain consistent and find new ways to succeed, especially now, they will have to branch out into more things like they have grown to. But Netflix in 2015 was one of the first to be like, hey, this is a very profitable way to get viewers to pay. And what ESPN ran into was having to pay billions of dollars out to have these broadcasting rights and contracts that they can't get out of, even though that's not their number one revenue source anymore. However, if they were to have their own on-demand networks, they would be the king of all their contracts, and they could pivot in ways that would serve them during the times that they needed, and they would have a lot more flexibility, as well as the subscribers would have a lot more flexibility in what they wanted to consume. And because there's lists of favorites, you can go back and watch things. A lot of it's very customizable, and I feel like that would be the best way for everyone to get what they want in that situation, and for ESPN to remain very dominant in the sports media and all channel revenue services.